You made a point early on in your answer there to talk about the customer focus and then bringing that into the rest of the company. There was a really incredible study that was done 2 or 3 years ago by McKinsey, and that they said that only 15% of companies actually execute on a voice of the customer program. But you just brought it up as the most important thing in translating that into the rest of the company.
That's an interesting one. You can over rotate and you can constantly be or you can constantly be changing your focus, which that would be detrimental. And we would overload and kill our developers if we weren't able to prioritize and link these kind of feedback sessions to real revenues. We do spend quite a lot of time then looking at the feedback and quantifying it and giving it a revenue that's, if you do this, I will deliver that type conversations. And that's important. There's a feedback loop, and then there's a prioritization conversation that's continually happening, and a prioritization in terms of what we're feeding back to product, and then what product thinks they will deliver to us by when, so that we can then feed that back into the enablement cycle.
I love it. You talked about that cycle has to be dependent on customer outcomes, like product truth mapped to customer outcomes. I think that's like when I was mentioning that study there, it's a discipline. It's not a bunch of different departments working in silos of different forms and beliefs of customer truth, one in product, one in sales, one in marketing, one in customer success. How do you unify that? When I talk to B2B C-suite executives, the number one challenge that they tell me that they have is internal alignment. What you just talked about was an incredibly aligned set of departments and teams inside of your company. So I'm just curious, that's not an easy feat to achieve. I'm just curious about how you do that.
This is where it starts. I think culture is a big piece of that. You've got to work with people that have a very significant amount of mutual respect. And the old 2 ears, 1 mouth philosophy applies very strongly to the way that you communicate with each other. We have the obvious kind of meeting. We're a very distributed company, by the way. We have executives in Estonia. We have executives in Europe, outside Estonia, in the UK. We have them on the East Coast of the US, and I'm here on the West Coast. You have to be pretty flexible to get that kind of level of communication going, right? So my day starts, I don't know, sometimes at 4 o'clock in the morning, because that's when it's the time where we can all unite. Second, all egos are parked at the door. Everybody comes to the table with a very firm commitment to having robust conversation, but in a really collaborative manner to try and come out with an agreement. We will debate robustly and then agree, and then we take action. That sounds a bit trite, but it's the way it works. If you have an ego in the room that will go passive aggressive on you, will agree at something and then delay something, or you have egos in the room that just can't come to an agreement, the magic doesn't happen. It's when you get a bunch of intelligent people debating with an agreed kind of, okay, we're going to come out of this with a solution. It's got to have ownership, and it's got to have a timeline by which it's going to be deployed. That's when it starts to happen, and you can iterate and you can innovate and you can get that repeat feedback loop happening really quickly. The flywheel starts happening. Customers pile in because they understand you're innovating. They give you more and more feedback, and then it's really, okay, now let's do the prioritization thing. What are we going to do that's going to result in the best outcome for the company? Yeah, my job is to try and steer the conversation from the customer and customer success perspective as much as possible. Give as much, I think, prioritized feedback, and prioritization in my context is really kind of revenue aligned. If you do this, I'm certain I can deliver this amount of revenue by this time frame, and then we sit down and figure out how we're going to get it done. That answer the question?